Ladies and gentlemen, this is the final plenary for Cyber UK 2023. Please welcome to the stage NCSC CEO Lindy Cameron.
So welcome back to the final plenary session of Cyber UK 2023. I hope you've all had lunch. I have to say, I got dragged off for 2 media interviews, so I managed to miss the last round of excellent Irish stew. Hope you enjoyed the exhibition centre, the final stream sessions, and a time to make more connections and have rich conversations. So last month, I was delighted and really honoured actually to have a conversation with renowned tech pioneer and investor, Herman Hauser. Some of you will remember, in fact, some of you probably owned one of Herman's early ventures, the famed BBC Micro, one of the things I learnt to enjoy computing on in my school computer lab. It was a computer that revolutionized home computing and actually computing for schools as well. So we had a fascinating discussion, about his journey from Cambridge to Acorn Computers, all the way through to his current venture of Amadeus Capital. We talked about how, in that time, the importance of cybersecurity in the development of modern technology had become more and more critical. We won't have time to show the whole interview now, but I'm really pleased to say we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel shortly. But in the meantime, we'd like to start this panel session by sharing some key excerpts from the interview. We pick the chat up as we debate incentivizing the markets to improve cybersecurity. Cue video.
Innovative companies, and in particular deep technology companies, both on the ICT side and on the life science side, is really where the growth in the economy is going to come from. We're not going to get it by producing Nike shoes or any of the traditional sectors. It has to come from innovative breakthroughs that come out of universities or big research labs. And the ecosystems that now exist are the bases that allow you to build these companies and build them now much faster than ever before. I mean, we've just had the most spectacular example with ChatGPT, which went from 0 to, I think, 5 million users in a week or two, or 5 days, I think, was the 0 to a million users. So Instagram, I think, was the previous record holder.
So how is it that we can try and incentivize, for us, of course, in particular, not only a real choice, but also a choice that is a secure choice?
When it comes to security, governments have to ensure that we've got access to all the machinery, all the instrumentation, all the computers, all the technology that allows a country to ensure the security of government, but also of the economy.
We can modify some of the options and choices people have, things like two-factor authentication that just make it harder. But surely we ought to have been able to reduce the attack surface more effectively over time to lower the vulnerability of the technology itself. And that's clearly not something that the market is demanding. And part of that, I suppose, is because people don't want to invest in understanding the technology they're buying. They simply want to know how it functions and what it will do for them. But surely there must have been a debate in the technology ecosystem about how to try and create incentives to do that better.
Like with the innovation ecosystem, this is a team sport. We need the government to do their bit, both on the awareness side, on the legislation side, the financial community to invest in cybersecurity startups, because there are lots of clever new ways of doing that. Being aware that quantum computers are a big game changer, a very fundamental game changer of attacking the most widely used encryption standard that we have in the world with the RSA 2048 standard. But we all need to work together on it. There are lots of different layers of security, starting with the microprocessor. And that's one of the reasons why ARM has introduced the trust zone, I think now 20 years ago. And there are more and more deeply embedded security systems, starting with the chip design, that makes it harder, if not impossible, to hack systems, even little systems like robots that clean your house. And so it starts with the chip level. Then I was delighted to find out recently we now have a microkernel, which is the sort of small operating system that has been proved correct. One of the big problems in software is that when people write software, they don't actually normally do a mathematical proof that what they wrote actually is going to do what they intended to do. And proving that what you have written is actually what you intended, has the consequences that you originally intended is an extremely difficult problem. That's called proving, as proof theory, it's proving things to be correct. So there's a lot of effort going into that. We're making great progress, but there is no operating system that is proved correct except for the SEL4 microkernel, which isn't widely used. So these are things all the way up the stack, from the software, over the operating system, through the applications, and we've got to have efforts at all layers.
So how do we try and build resilience into that future?
By supporting the research and then the spin-out companies with the expertise that allow us to come up with solutions for each of the layers in the stack. And by divide and conquer. So one of the things that is so dangerous, of course, with these attacks is if they get into a central system. A lot of our systems are very centralized. Once you get into the center, you've got control of everything. So one of the exciting developments in security are these microkernels, and the return of the capability machine. Cambridge, of course, invented the capability machines, and there are lots of stories in Cambridge, lots of exciting stories about the capability machine, which everybody thought was a brilliant idea, and why it didn't work. But there is a resurgence of that basic idea of having capabilities where you divide things up.
Herman Hauser, thank you very much indeed. So Herman, what happens if we do nothing?
Well, bad things happen.
Welcome to Cyber UK 2033. We come together for our 17th annual Cyber UK conference under this year's theme, Patching and Remediating Our Way to Suboptimal Cyber Security. It has been another busy year for our sector. We reached the 60th anniversary of the discovery of the buffer overflow, which continued this year to be one of the most effective and commonly exploited vulnerabilities, enabling attacks on critical systems and services around the world. Our drive to connect and integrate devices and applications across the world continue to falter due to exploitable software vulnerabilities. Attacks we thought would be things of the past continued to get through. We saw that while many vulnerable devices did not themselves perform critical functions, the loss of so many in succession was devastating. The world could only just look on as colossal DDoS attacks were carried out against critical services. It is clear we now face an ecosystem-wide crisis. Confidence in the security of connected systems has plunged, and new technologies can be deployed at scale. Demand for innovation has fallen, and we lack the research capacity and investments as our efforts are spent on remediation. It has been a year of plenty for our adversaries and hostile actors who have taken advantage of our thinly protected attack surface. They have refined their capabilities with new and original ways of exploiting legacy code with ease. Back in 2023, we faced unmatched growth in digital and tech development. We predicted this would bring huge benefits and further the national and economic security interests of the UK and other free and open societies. We also predicted these developments could be at risk if we didn't fix the foundations. So, at Cyber UK 2033, we will look to answer some of the most challenging questions facing the international cyber community today. Why didn't our counterparts in 2023 act to prevent the risks they predicted? Why didn't they fix the foundations of emerging technology? Why didn't they innovate and build the technologies that underpinned our values? Why didn't they secure cyberspace so it remained free, open, and democratic? Cyber UK 2033, patching and remediating our way to suboptimal cyber security.
Pretty serious points about what the future looks like if we fail to fix the foundations of today and tomorrow's technology. And I have to say, I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem entirely implausible. I do hope these scenarios won't come to pass, but it would be remiss of us as a community not to discuss and do something about some of these important issues. I know many of us in our industry are really concerned about it. After all, our rallying call this year is a secure digital tomorrow starts today. So, to discuss these critical issues, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce the final panel of Cyber UK, Fixing the Foundations. So first of all, I'd like to introduce my amazing guests. Richard Brissenthwaite, Executive Vice President and Chief Architect at ARM. Christine Maxwell, Director of Cyber Defense and Risk at Defense Digital. Paul Stein, Chairman of Rolls-Royce Small Modular Reactors. And Dave Harcourt, Chief Security Authority and Automation Director at BT. I particularly like to say thanks to Christine, who stepped in at short notice, basically, when one of our other panelists was felled by COVID. So thank you very much indeed. Please give them a big hand. So panel, I know at the end of day 2, you have all been having a fantastic discussion/argument back in the green room about what we're actually going to do about this. You've just seen the glitch on the screen. You know, our challenge is, we've got the technology, why aren't we using it? Let's commit to fixing our foundations. So if I could start by just asking you, so bluntly, why does this matter and why are we not doing something about it? Richard, can I start with you?
Well, I think the video got it absolutely right. We have been solving the same problem the same ways, and I think there's an old principle that doing the same thing multiple times and expecting different results is kind of the definition of madness. The reality is that we've had the same sort of security issues for a very long time. Buffer overflows, as was alluded to, is something like 50 years old. We know that 70% of all of the vulnerabilities that are really exploitable come from memory safety issues, and we're kind of solving this in a very ad hoc way. And the question is, can we do better than that? And the answer is there are technologies that are potentially able to do that. We have been, the Digital Security by Design program, we've been very involved in the creation of that. We created this Morello chip that is taking the Cherry technology developed by University of Cambridge and SRI. And that technology has the potential to provide a step change. But the trouble with that step change is it takes a lot of work to deploy that because there's a long and complicated supply chain. You need to establish the value through that supply chain and ensure that the people who are actually bearing the costs in that supply chain are also getting the benefits. And there are challenges that come from that.
Fantastic. Dave, what about you? What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was a bit scared when I heard the video in 2033 and I thought, actually, that feels a bit closer than 2033.
Yeah,
but anyway.
indeed. Exactly. I'm not sure it'll take that long.
I mean, I think, I support what we're just saying. I think from a supply chain perspective, I think this is about how do we actually create that demand, right? Downstreaming research technology, I think, has always been a big challenge and issue. And actually, the way to do that is create the large demand. And I think, from our perspective, from BT perspective, I think about the volumes of devices what we have at home and the criticality of our network infrastructure. I think the demand's there to actually say, well, from a managing our infrastructure perspective, being able to do away with the volumes of vulnerabilities that we have to deal with on a day-in, day-out basis across infrastructure that's the scale and complexity that we run across BT. I mean, it's a future that we have to embrace, and we have to find a way of making it happen. And I think it's all about creating that supply, demand, need, and drive that pushes the scale, because this is going to work unless we actually try and find a scale solution that's actually going to drive the technology into something that becomes a BAU cost affordable approach, and that's, I think, key for me.
Great. Paul, what's your view?
Well, I'm actually going to take the discussion in a slightly different direction, because I'm going to disagree with Herman Hauser, who said the big
Excellent.
growth...
Always good for a panel on the end of day two, so go for it.
Yeah, since he's not here to defend
Yes.
himself. But, Herman said that all the growth is going to come from the digital industries, or implied that, and maybe the biotech industries. Actually, we're seeing something a little bit different happen, which is a massive growth in the hard tech industries. We're seeing a lot of onshoring. We're seeing growth in defense for fairly obvious reasons. We're seeing the regrowth of aerospace, which is 2.4% of our GDP in aerospace, and climate tech, and the company that I'm representing, Small Modular Reactors, is not a small undertaking.
No, indeed.
These are
Or a straightforward one.
pretty big things. So that sort of position of hard tech in our gross domestic product means that we've got to look at that as a challenge to be protected as much as consumer IT and the soft tech industries. And in the hard tech world, the digitization, the digital twinning of the products and the use of what we call Industry 4.0 methods, it's a German term that is basically to do with digitizing the whole manufacturing and supply chain process, means the attack surfaces are just mushrooming. So if I can just sort of give a few data points, in the design side, we're now using 100,000 core clusters running for 2 weeks for one design point on a jet engine, to give you a sort of sense of how much we're embodying that in IT. And we might have 2,000 people designing a jet engine all over the world. So there's all sorts of kind of question marks that come about protecting that. In manufacturing, we're now codifying not just the 3D shape of something, but the manufacturing methods. So you actually package up for every single part, and a small modular reactor has 30 million codified parts. 30 million parts. And each one isn't just the shape of the nut or the bolt or the reactor pressure vessel, it's actually how you make it. And of course, once you codify it, it means that the IP can be stolen, not just what the shape of it is, but actually how you make it. And then of course in service, famously we monitor jet engines in flight and that sort of thing, but that's getting a far richer assortment of data now as customers want more and more real-time monitoring, which means the products are very high quality, and we can do something about servicing before they land. But of course, it just once again increases the sort of so-called attack surface, and even the use of Internet of Things now. So tagging pallets from suppliers through to the factories as they go up through the various tiers of the supply chain, guess what? You're creating a digital footprint. So all of that is brilliant from the point of view of cost, scaling, because once you've got a fully codified design of a nuclear reactor, you can just say to anyone, go make one of these for us, and in theory, it reaches the quality that you've required. But oh boy, it opens up a world of chaos in terms of attack vectors. And the last thing I think I'll say, Lindy, is this is a global undertaking. So whereas in defense, for very obvious reasons, we monitor where all the supplies of the various bits come from, when it comes to aerospace engines, there are 36,000 parts in a typical jet engine, and they'll come from all over the world. The UK content's only 30%. It comes from all over the world, including countries that we would sort of normally say are threat countries. So managing that growth is a challenge, and I'll come on to what we can do about it in a bit. But for now, I'll throw down the challenge.
Great. That definitely sounds hard. Christine, what's it look like from your perspective from the MOD?
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because in my job as the CISO of MOD, I spend all my time dealing with today's tooling and today's challenge, and I couldn't agree with you more about all those, where we spend all of our time. And you look around the vendors in the hall there in terms of what they're trying to sell me, in terms of what I can buy that'll solve world peace as we do it.
Oh, yes. Haven't thought that was
MOD's
mission.
in terms of how we go. And so it's actually there's little bits about how do we pull through tech? Yeah. And actually, I had a vendor at me recently going, I've got this at TRL6, I need you to help me pull it through. How do you do that? And I think there's something, if something's been invented here that's going to make a fundamental step change in security, because I think that's what we've got to do, because we are still plugging away at the same things as we've been plugging away at for years. There's something about taking a bit of time and, you know, a bit of focus to it. And I think there's something really quite exciting to be here, that we're going to have to do something differently as a result.
Yeah. I mean, I was really struck actually talking to Jen Easterly earlier that she has got quite a lot tougher in the couple of years I've known her about the real responsibility of the vendors to actually, you know, sort of undertake a kind of corporate social responsibility, that actually it's not good enough just to wait for governments to regulate or wait for customers to complain. There's a fundamental responsibility that's much deeper in underpinning what society will face in the future to really build security in from the beginning. Yeah. And I think the guide we launched last week on, you know, secure by design and secure by default, I think is part of that. But it feels like we've gone beyond the sort of guidelines on how to do it nicely and slowly. It's a sort of much bigger call to action to really try and more radically think about what to do today. So go on, Richard.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, this idea of a responsibility is something that we think in ARM is very important, because for a long time, you know, ARM historically very much a hardware company, although we have a lot of software engineers because you can't build hardware without lots of software engineers. But if you're building CPU hardware, it's very easy to say, well, the hardware is correct, mostly.
It's just the user that's
we had some fun and games with Spectrum Meltdown, but we got past that. But in general, the hardware is correct, and it's just the software that's wrong. And that's completely the wrong way of thinking about it, because with billions, in fact, I looked it up before this, I think there's an estimate of 3 trillion lines of code have been written in the last 20 years. With that sort of amount of code out there, it's not going to be perfect. We cannot, as hardware people, turn around and say, you know what, it's a software problem. We've got to make the hardware better, because there are always going to be these problems. And so we started with a whole bunch of incremental improvements, but the evidence is those incremental improvements are just how to sort of apply more gaffer tape to the problem. We need to do more of a root and branch look at it. And this is kind of why the challenge is, how do you deploy that radical technology? When the industry is naturally set up to be incremental, everyone says, give me a bit more performance, give me a bit more power efficiency. Those are kind of the key metrics that we're used to in the computing world. They don't say, give me a bit more security, because actually, because of the great work done by an awful lot of people in this room and elsewhere, a lot of people don't see the security problem, because it's like the swan swimming along and the legs are frantically moving underneath to give this impression that you can trust computing. But as we know, with all the patching and all the stuff we've been talking about, that is, that's a hugely inefficient process. So we need to communicate that in addition to giving more performance and more efficiency, that there is a real need for the hardware to be inherently more secure. And then get the software to really demonstrate that they can make use of that in a really tangible sense. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of coordination across multiple layers of this incredible stack of industries and disciplines that we work with.
No, absolutely. So I mean, so moving then to the you know, so what can we actually do about this? How do we? You know, this is the group of people out here who, you know, ought to be feeling quite guilty about that 2023 timeline. You know, most of us will probably still be employed in this industry at that point, basically, and therefore somebody will point the finger at us and say, right, you know, why didn't you do better? And certainly it's one of the things that keeps me awake at night is thinking, you know, what would my successor sort of ring me up and moan about? And that is quite a large part of what I think they might ring me up and moan about if we don't get a move on. So what can we actually do? I mean, you know, we talked, Richard, about the example of actually where we've been collaborating together to think about the relationship. Do you want to just talk a bit about what that looks like?
I'll come on to that. I mean, we have an incremental process every year where we increment the architecture. We add new features to it. And actually, approximately half of those over the last 10 years have been targeted at various security issues. So that shows, you know, there is a lot going on in hardware. A lot of that is terribly incremental. What you discover is really hard to push a technology that people are unfamiliar with, because they go, well, tell me why this is good. And I go, well, you need to write some software that will really benefit from that. And people go, well,
just because,
you know, it's
at some point in the future you'll see some benefits I can't yet define.
Exactly. Trust me, in a few years' time you'll love it.
It's expensive, but it'll be worth it, you know.
And that doesn't really work as a story. So the challenge is, what you want to do is to turn it into pull. And this is where the Digital Security by Design program came together. Thank you very much, you wrote a large check for us. I think it was UKRI, but rather than the NCSC. But
we wrapped our arm around them.
You know, that got a prototype system out there, and that has now got a whole bunch of software people. And for the last couple of these events, actually what was going on is people from ARM would be on stage saying, hey, this is a really great technology. That was us pushing. what was really encouraging is we had Microsoft and Google on the stage today. We didn't have anyone from ARM, we didn't have anyone from University of Cambridge on the stage saying, this is a good technology. We're starting to create that pull.
Right.
So this, again, create a prototype, show its value, demonstrate it, and that way you can actually make the case that says this is really worth scaling up to an industrial scale deployment rather than the prototype. But it takes quite a lot of money and quite a lot of effort.
Yeah. Christine?
And I was in that session this morning as well, and I must admit I was sitting out there having a little, heart attack to myself when DSTL said, well, it's all about secure by design and how we take capability programs through, and the likes of defence to be able to say, well, if I start to mandate or to say to new programs as they come forward that you need to start doing, using different sorts of chips or, how you're going to do that, it's a start. It's the sort of things we can do. But then you told me defence isn't enough to be able to do it. So it was like, oh well. But maybe it's a case of we need to get together as, big industries, whether it's telcos and defence, and actually that's the answer to give the supply chain, because we've certainly seen it in high-grade crypt in terms of being able, how do you prove to the vendors that there's going to be enough demand to make the chips in the first place? Yeah. It feels like it's very similar.
It is a very common problem. The trouble with the economics of building a processor is it's hundreds of millions of pounds to get a successful high-end processor out there. And there's a list of features that people would like in it. And you can't put everything in because you've got cost and area and power constraints. And so effectively it's about that prioritization, and you've got to make the case that security is giving a sufficient benefit compared with adding more performance or making it more efficient. You can't do absolutely everything simultaneously, unfortunately.
No, we can't, but we have seen in the consumer space that basically that customers hear that and then they say thanks, but just give me the cheap one. So I have to say, certainly my experience of government departments is that's pretty much that's what happens as well, right? So I think there is a real challenge. But Paul,
this was partly the conversation Richard and I were having, right? I mean, you look at the absolute that competitive cost base that we need to get technology down to, and I think the only way we can solve that is actually by driving volume, right? And actually the only way we get volume is by all of us actually coming together to start to put the demand and driving, because without that volume we're never going to get to the cost point that actually gets a home router down to a cost point that enables us to do something that remains competitive in the market space.
Paul?
Yeah, I guess my plea, and particularly the 2033 vision, which is sort of orthogonal to the points that are being made sort of here, really, is that in 2033, I bet you that hard tech is going to be a much bigger part of our gross domestic product than it is today. Yeah. And there's a tendency for cyber world to take a look at deep tech and high tech, and it turns into a bit of a self-licking lollipop. In other words, it looks after itself, where there's this big other world that's growing. And I think one of my pleas is that can we take a closer look at the needs of growing high tech, and maybe Cyber UK 2023, 2024, 2025 could have a look at this. Because there needs to be a lot more mutual understanding between cyber world, high tech world, and the hard tech world. Otherwise we're going to fall behind. And that might involve a lot more international cooperation than we've been used to. Particularly when you start connecting global suppliers together. And there's some really sort of challenging sort of issues here to do with threat tracking and that sort of thing. But I think they're solvable, but we've got to have a call to arms to actually go and do it. Maybe new forensics now to chase up the bad guys when it's a multinational sort of operation. So it's just taking another look at risk management across the cyber field to add to all the good stuff that's been spoken about here. Certainly will benefit defence, because a lot of what defence buys these days is internationally constructed. But I just think we need to make sure the spotlight's in the right place.
Yeah. I wonder if it's not just the security community, though, and we need the IT community in a much different place. Yeah. Because to make these fundamental changes that we want to make, because it can, there'll be lots of people here, it's just monumentally hard to get things done, that actually if we had a major shift in that, and how we start to influence them, and that was what's nice about Google and Microsoft being on that panel. Maybe there's stuff like that we need to do that's different as well.
I mean, the security community is the most receptive one to new technologies, because they sort of say they're seeing security as the biggest problem, therefore that's a problem that we need technology to solve. The rest of the world quite often is seeing a range of different things, and actually really esteeming security as being fundamentally important is not in everyone's minds. They think security at the moment is good enough because actually it basically works, doesn't it? And you kind of get that feedback, and then you get the, just give me the cheap one.
Wendy would probably
and that's sad.
disagree.
But, no, but it's your job to care about it, but a lot of the world doesn't, and that's the problem.
No, indeed, but I mean, I think, and you're absolutely right. I think part of the challenge is how it is you get people to conceptualize that. And I think your point, Paul, is really right. That it's the sort of it can't just be this community talking to itself.
No,
it actually has to be a wider conversation. Actually, I was struck being in Northern Ireland about that, listening to Joe Kennedy talking about some of the investment he wants to bring into Northern Ireland. There's a question about how it is we get some of these conversations to happen between some of those sectors.
And there has to be mutual understanding. It's not just the cyber industry working into
No.
the hard tech industry, it's the other way around as well. And there's been some infamous security breaches when hard tech companies, and I'm thinking of one which I won't name.
Go on.
It's a US company, so I definitely won't name it. Gave a whole digital drawing set to a supplier saying we want this bit of this missile. Well, guess what? It was a juicy target because that tier 2 supplier didn't have the security protection of the tier 1 supplier, and so the whole drawing set was stolen. Some people might know the incident I'm talking about. And that's just misunderstanding on behalf of people that just don't see the vulnerability. So that's why we just need to talk more, and why I'm sort of giving a call to arms. Maybe Cyber 2025 needs a big, hard tech section.
But it is really bizarre to me why it is people don't conceptualize that, right? Because in a sense, if you'd left that set of drawings on a train, we had definitely had a nice security inquiry, and sort of, somebody would have had the finger pointed at them. But somehow, when it happens within the supply chain, whenever it's a more conceptual space, it doesn't seem to have the same
complete
impact.
misunderstanding. It's a view that because they've got a particular ISO standard or a mark or something like that, that's good enough. But you can minimize risk by understanding and being able to conceptualize and say, I'm just giving you this little part of the digital drawing set because that's the bit you're making.
And that's just the basics, isn't it? That's
It
just
is the
that's
basics.
just need to know.
But people are making mistakes today.
Yeah, exactly.
But people don't actually understand how sophisticated cyber criminals are.
Yeah.
I mean, the very first time I was shown something like return-oriented programming, it was like, good grief, people can actually construct a completely alternative instruction set by reusing fragments of code all over the place. Incredibly sophisticated, and then people are built on top of that and on top of that. It is an ongoing arms race.
And that's just the cyber criminals,
and
right?
that's the cyber
Let
criminals.
alone the sort of
But the
more
trouble is,
sophisticated
people
actors.
think, because a lot of people think computers are inherently secure,
Yeah.
then handing over entire design is much safer than leaving a blueprint on a train, because, hey, it's on a computer, it'll be secure, it'll be all
I
right.
encrypted the file when I
I
sent
encrypted
it.
the file.
Good enough. Yeah.
That'll be good enough.
I think I'm getting more depressed by the second. But yeah. the job of work is getting harder. But no, I mean, it really resonates. So, but actually, just back, Richard, to the question I asked about the sort of innovation side, which is, so is there more we need to do on the innovation side, or is this really a deployment and demand issue?
There's always more innovation you can do. I mean, the idea that, hey, the problem is solved would be, if I said that, well, Robert, anyway, will kill me, because he and I have been working together for a long time. No, we need to keep on innovating. But actually, we've got a big step forward in a number of areas that just needs deployment. And you have to start that and build on it further. I think it was Ben in the earlier session highlighted that there will be multiple versions of the technologies behind digital security by design. The entirety of computing has always innovated on itself. It always does that. But how do you take this first step to make a big step forward? That is actually much more a deployment challenge, and it's getting the right people incentivized to really care about this and to create that pull through.
Yeah. So who convenes? Who pays? I mean, how do we sort of, how do we actually do that? How do we create that set of incentives that really does work?
So, let me make a start on that one, I guess. I mean, Richard and I were talking about this from a supply chain perspective, right? There are massive benefits that reducing the inherent volumes of vulnerabilities have in an operational efficiency of running infrastructure such as we operate, right? So there's a massive cost-benefit element of how does this work for us. There's a cost-benefit element in terms of how does that work in our supply chain, because at the end of the day, if our suppliers have got less vulnerabilities to have to deal with, that's less cost for them to have to deal with. So the cost benefit flows through the supply chain, and this is, I think part of this is about how do we create that whole end-to-end supply drive that pulls the technology through. Because if we can't find out the drive that pulls technology through, then we're never going to get off the starting blocks of having some hardware in a small world that never gets out there. So this I think is a call to action really, as to how can we actually come together that drives that overall demand to avoid us getting into that 2033 world that we saw earlier.
And it is about that mutual understanding. It's a really good point of understanding other people's pain. So if you're a hardware company building a phone or a computer or whatever, and you're not responsible for the software and all the patching, you're not necessarily incurring the costs of these regular updates. All you see is the cost of the silicon, and the fact that I haven't got another feature. I've instead got to have this new piece of security, which isn't giving me a direct benefit. There's somebody else in the supply chain that's doing that. And we need to make sure that the monies flow in a way that rewards the people who are taking the costs as well, which is a challenge.
But to come back to Lindy's question about who convenes, I think it's reasonably easy, he says, within a nation.
Yep.
Within a nation,
Okay.
and maybe your organisation ought to be the convening body.
Thanks. Yep. No.
You know,
We're up for helping.
in your spare time. Your organisation could be the convening body, for setting some of these interchange standards. Certainly the Americans are moving ahead with their sort of various industries and hard tech. The tough one that we now have to crack is international partnerships.
Yep.
So coalitions of the willing between people that are prepared to work to the same common level of security standards, second-tier people whose maybe nation states can't quite protect the information in a way that we would do, and then dealing with states that we would, in the cyber world, call hostile states. And that's, I think, the challenge, how we convene a body that can cope with that sort of level of difference between partners.
Yeah.
But the digital security design program that you pulled together actually did at least work internationally. It had US companies, it's had UK companies, got a lot of interest from DARPA involved in it as well. So that there is at that foundational technology of the processors and the low-level software, that is an international effort, which is an encouraging thing. And actually, it goes into other countries that are not necessarily so friendly as well, because actually the semiconductor supply chain is truly global.
Yeah.
Yes. Possibly not quite global enough at times, but yes. So for more discussion. Brilliant. So we've got 4 minutes left. So final thoughts then for the audience out here. What do you want them to do, and what are we going to do? Dead silence.
Well,
throw the challenge back at them.
I've already said it. I wandered around all the stands and some fantastic sort of technology today, but I just was a bit struck by how few people understood what I'm going to call the hard tech world that I've made. So please go and find out more about it. Go and find out its vulnerabilities, and please sort of skew some of your products towards the needs of protecting the world of hard tech.
So what kind of organisations do we need to have next year, sort of, in the conversation to do that? Who are the sort of innovators or the sort of thought leaders that you would want to have in the room having that conversation?
Well, I think I would invite a selection of people from defence. I think you can come back.
Christine's dress book out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the chief information officers of the big hard tech companies who can really lay down the challenge to the people here in a better way than I can, perhaps, and say, look, this is what we need to protect our global supply chains, and then. If we start to see some percentage of the products being produced that aren't just for sort of tracing the threat and protecting the high-tech and deep-tech world, then I think we would have succeeded.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I was one of the earlier sessions, Microsoft talking about 70% less vulnerabilities based on this technology. I think my ask to everyone is imagine a world where you've got 70% less vulnerabilities to deal to deal with than you've got today. And surely you all want to be in that world, right? And so the only way we're all going to be in that world is by putting the asks out there. We're all using common technology. The things that I build, we've got in our core infrastructure and our consumer devices are all built off the same sort of technology platforms that we use for everything across all the sectors. So if we all want to be in that world of a less vulnerable world, let's put the asks and start the demand for that starts to get the the ball moving, because that's the only way we're going to move it, right?
But when I mean, I'm slightly surprised you haven't thrown more stuff back at us, the government, in a sense. When cost becomes a competitive issue, then basically, who moves first in that situation?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like telecoms, right?
But I do think actually, if we did that kind of analysis element of actually how does it help, I think there is a cost benefit that works without government having to compel.
Yeah.
So I think in some cases where government have to compel it, it's necessary, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary in this world.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Well,
encouragement.
maybe we need to look and evaluate and understand it, right?
Christine?
My call to action is for all the suppliers out there that are working with either MOD or any of the government departments to really get involved in the Secure by Design initiatives that are all being rolled out this year, and really changing how you work, and it's that thought process. And maybe immediately we're not going to be putting new chipsets into capabilities, but as we start to think about that and we're writing requirements that are going forward for certain things that might appear in the 2030s, that actually we are going to be making that move so that that video doesn't come through. So actually I think there's things that we need to start now and not be waiting till 2028 to do stuff, because we need to move. So I think there's something for us all to do in that respect.
Brilliant. Richard?
And I think that I agree with everything that's been said. I think the key thing is how do we get the rest of the actors, not just the security people in the supply chain, to actually esteem better security is really worth spending money on. It's a first-class requirement to have better security at its heart in the hardware, because at the moment, essentially, security is something of a hygiene factor. People think they've got it, and now they just want, as you say, either the cheaper thing or the faster thing.
Yeah.
They should also want the more secure thing, and I don't think there's enough of that in the general population at the moment.
Fantastic. So I'm going to have to say I'm really taking away the fact that we need to make sure that we are not simply sort of talking within an echo chamber to each other about how tremendously important it is that somebody but not us does something now. And actually think about who it is we need to do. And that is one of the things I think we can help do, is do some of that convening as well as some of that innovation. So thank you to my panel for bringing so much energy and enthusiasm, not only to me after a long 2 days, but also to the audience as well, and to the conversation. I think I hope that video is one that will sort of nag away in the back of the collective consciousness of the people who've watched it, as you think, am I really doing enough? What will somebody ask me in 10 years' time? So thank you to the people who made that, but thank you ever so much to my panel. Please give them a big hand.
Well done.
Well done.
Please now welcome Chief Engineer, NCSC Engineering, Carolyn Ainsworth.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, while we've all been enjoying the fantastic content and making new connections over the last 2 days, we've been running, in partnership with DCIT, our highly popular CyberDen. A less hostile environment than its more famous BBC cousin, the panel of cyber dragons, including me, heard from an awesome set of cyber entrepreneurs, startups and innovators about their ideas, designs, services and products that will help find tomorrow's solutions to some of today's cyber challenges. Each pitch was judged on its originality, its viability and its impact, with the winning party getting a year's consultancy and the potential for a pilot with the NCANC to help turn their concept into a reality. 10 pitches were made from people from all over the UK, including 2 from Northern Ireland, and we'd like to thank all those who took part for their many brilliant ideas. It was a very strong field, presenting us with an incredibly difficult choice on the winner. So before announcing the overall winner, I'd like to mention 2 pitches that were notable. They were Visible, which allows users to better understand and manage their digital footprint to keep more secure online, and SiteHop, who provide low latency, hardware enforced encryption to help enable security of high-speed data links. But I am delighted to announce the overall winner is ITAS Secure Technologies, whose product aggregates risk assessments from third-party tools to allow cyber insurance companies to better assess risks. The panel felt that this innovative and exciting product would have broad applicability and make a strong contribution to an existing important market. So let's show our appreciation to the winners and all the contestants from this year's Cyber Den, who I think many of whom are in the room. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage NCSC CEO, Lindy Cameron.
Brilliant. So it falls to me again to call Cyber UK 2023 to a close. I don't know about you, but I now get this sort of distinct emotional frisson every time that music plays. I think it's going to live as a sort of earworm with me for months. So I really do hope you agree that this has been an absolutely excellent event. We have had fascinating speeches and panel discussions. We've had a brilliant set of exhibitions. We've had great opportunities to meet new people and reconnect with old contacts. For me, some of the amazing highlights have been the quite extraordinarily good weather in Northern Ireland. Can I just say, I mean, like, yeah, obviously, it is exactly like this all of the time. When you come back with your friends and families, because I am Northern Ireland's best tourist ambassador, then it'll be just like this. But seriously, this is Belfast at its absolute best. It's fantastic. For me personally, I think there were some real highlights. So the panel I chaired on day one with Kemba Walden, a real inspiration, calling out the face of cybersecurity of the future. And I have to say, David Coe's fantastic response was to suddenly realize that actually there's a risk we'd have to make sure there was a man on the panel to make sure we'd got balance. Let's imagine that world, okay, and let's all do our best to help to make that a reality. I have to say I'm going to ignore David's comments in karaoke because I really sincerely hope that does not become a part of Cyber UK. We had Victor from Ukraine. Every time our Ukrainian colleagues join us, I imagine the journey that they have to take to get here. Literally, the physical journey on a train. The fact that men in Ukraine at the moment cannot leave Ukraine, except for conferences like this, because the whole nation is currently mobilized in a war of national crisis. So it means a lot to us, and I think it means a lot to them to be here today. He imagined a future in which a cyber Ukraine would be possible. And again, I want us all to imagine that future. I have called out already the giraffe from Blue Voyant as the best cyber swag. I think we're going to add to Cyber UK an official prize for best cyber swag, just to incentivize you all to be creative in what you put in your stands next year. My other highlight / lowlight was the quite extraordinary amount of media we've had this year. Some of it, as you all know, was entirely purposeful and intentional. A small amount of it in the Northern Ireland media space was slightly unintentional, and I've spent quite a lot of the last few days empathising and apologising for an incident that I wish hadn't happened, but nevertheless, that actually has connected me to some of the local communities here much more deeply than I imagined. But genuinely, I think the media team have done an extraordinary event, and it made me personally immensely proud to be standing outside the Waterfront Hall with a massive Cyber UK banner in the background, doing live TV here from Belfast. I also loved the fact we had the Good Friday Agreement 25-year conference happening up the road, and half the delegates for that sort of wandering past thinking, what is this thing, all right? And in some ways in my mind, they were describing the history, this is describing the future, and I think it matters so much to have both of those things happening at the same time. The leadership dinner last night, for those of you who were able to come, was a wonderful moment at the Titanic, and I hope has given people a taster, and particularly the Titanic addicts, of which there seem to be quite a large number, I have to say, but I'm not sure what that says about cybersecurity professionals. We'll be back to see that museum in its entirety. And we had the CEO giving a really beautiful description of some of the safety failings which collectively resulted in the fatal crash and a massive investigation into what went wrong. It was a real lesson in safety management, and as I said last night, my favourite story is the fact that the chap who had the key to the binocular box was taken off the ship at the previous station before they went on their maiden voyage, and nobody could find the key to the binocular box. So sit and imagine what the analogy is for cybersecurity to not being able to find the key for the binocular box when you're sailing along through the field of icebergs. We've also had superb support. We have had 2 brilliant ministerial speeches. I'm personally immensely grateful to both CDL and to Tom Tugendhat for coming. We've had a phenomenal number of international partners come and stay for the whole event, so thank you very much indeed to all of you. We've had a fantastic set of kids from the next generation. I have to say I turned up to with Joe Kennedy, the US envoy to Northern Ireland, the economic envoy to Northern Ireland, to see some of the school kids from Dungannon, who looked profoundly unimpressed, I have to say, to be seeing some kind of ambassador and some kind of senior person who just wanted to get on with fixing their cyber problems, and sort of raised an eyebrow and I think hoped we would all leave. They are such an inspiration. A few weeks ago we had the Cyber First Girls Gala dinner, also at the Titanic Hotel, in fact. And I have to say, one of the things I said last night was, one of the reasons I know the Titanic Museum is a brilliant museum is because the 12 and 13-year-old girls were actually pretty impressed by it. But it was also just a brilliant, inspirational look into the cybersecurity future to understand what the future of cybersecurity looked like, because it was female, it was diverse, it was enthusiastic, it imagined a set of careers in the future that I think are wider than all of us could have done at that age. So they are an inspiration to me, and yeah, I think one of my best bits of my year. So therefore, what I'd like to do now is just to say a huge set of thank yous. So I want to thank all the people that have made this event a success. Firstly, I want to say a massive thank you to our sponsors, especially to our lead sponsors, Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services. It's important to recognize that the sponsorship we get for these conferences allows us to upskill a huge chunk of the public sector's cybersecurity team, and I am immensely grateful to them for making this wonderful event possible, but also to allowing us to do that upskilling. Thank you to all the exhibitors. I went around the stands more than once, as some of you probably noticed, though my private secretary basically almost killed me as I got captured and talked to for the umpteenth time as she was trying to get me to the next event. I really loved speaking with you. I particularly loved the Northern Ireland Cyber Pavilion right there in the center of the hall, unable to be avoided as you went in. So thank you to all of you who did that. It was brilliant to meet businesses, large, small, new, old. You should all be really proud of your respective organizations and their position within the cybersecurity community. It's what makes this event what it is having all of you here, making those connections, bumping into each other, having those conversations about what we do to make the future better. So thank you to our speakers and our panelists for sharing their thoughts and insights. There are people who are extroverts who love being on this stage, and there are people to whom standing in the waterfront hall looking at this audience is beyond terrifying, and I am deeply grateful to the full range of personalities who made it on stage to share their thoughts with us. It can be pretty intimidating, but it is so worth listening to that diversity of views. And it's a real privilege, in particular, to welcome so many speakers from wide and far around the world. This event wouldn't have been possible without a dedicated team that live and breathe Cyber UK all year round. So I'd like to say thank you to the ICC Belfast and all of their staff. You have made us feel so welcome, and this has been an absolutely brilliant venue. I'd like to say a massive thank you, and I should have learned how to say thank you in sign language, to Ben and Mark, who are our brilliant sign language interpreters, who I feel speak fluent cybersecurity far better than I do, basically. And I want to know what the words for the new large language models are in sign language. I'll have to learn it later. I want to say thank you for, now I'm worried about what you're saying. I'll check later. Thank you, a huge thank you to our event delivery partner, Bray Leno, who does such a spectacular job. But thank you very much indeed to the team at the National Cybersecurity Centre who've worked on this conference. This has been a massive team effort. I think you've seen so many of our leadership team, so many of our whole team, and there was a long queue of people who wanted to get tickets, but we couldn't bring everybody. Right across the NCSC, all contributing. But a particularly special call out and thank you to Della, to Emer, to Ali, to Sarah, George and Claire, and indeed to the whole wider comms team who, trust me, have worked literally night and day for the last 3 days. And indeed actually the team who ran the International Day on the first day as well. So finally, and most importantly, it's thank you to all of you. for coming to Cyber UK 2023, both in person and online. It has been really special to have you here in Belfast, and I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as me. I have genuinely loved being able to show you my city. So as tradition dictates, we will now hand the baton over from Belfast to the location for Cyber UK 2024. So there you go, we're off to Birmingham. I look forward to seeing you all in here. So thank you again for coming to Cyber UK here in Belfast. I know some of you are staying on. I do hope you enjoy everything the city has to offer. I understand the bars of Belfast were busy last night, and I hope for those of you who are staying, they're busy again tonight. We put £3 million, we reckon, into the Belfast economy over the last 3 days. I hope that wasn't all in the bars, but I suspect a fair proportion of it was. So thank you, and as we say in Northern Ireland, safe home, and thank you for the crack. Enjoy.
People who are innovative and forward-thinking. We are home to some of the brightest minds in cybersecurity, working to protect the world from the ever-evolving threats of cybercrime. We have become a global hotspot for cybersecurity research, innovation and development, and our companies offer world-class solutions to meet cybersecurity challenges. We have an impressive track record of inward investment, with Northern Ireland ranked as the #1 international investment location for US cybersecurity firms. And leading international technology and financial and professional services companies have chosen to locate their main cybersecurity operations here. We also have a strong cluster of locally grown firms, making an impact globally. Northern Ireland is innovating in areas such as securing apps, networks and cloud, identification, authentication and access control, threat intelligence, risk, compliance and fraud, managed security and advisory services, and operational tech security and connected devices. A strong focus on academic and industry collaboration has been key to our success. The Centre for Secure Information Technologies at Queen's University Belfast, CSIT, is the UK's National Innovation Knowledge Centre for Secure Information Technologies. As an academic centre of excellence in cybersecurity research and education, CSIT is a core player in the global cybersecurity research network, collaborating with world-leading companies. Northern Ireland is also a leading region for cybersecurity education and skills development. Courses are delivered in partnership with industry, with undergraduate, postgraduate and PhD programs, ensuring a pipeline of relevant skills. For career changers, the government-funded Cybersecurity Assured Skills Programme works with businesses to train people from a non-technical background, helping them to move into this priority area. Northern Ireland's cybersecurity ecosystem is further strengthened by organisations including NI Cyber, NI Cyber Security Centre, ADS and InvestNI. The sector has continued to grow in strength and size, and there is so much more to come. The UK government is investing £18.9 million to boost Northern Ireland's cybersecurity capability with the creation of a new cyber AI hub at CSIT. And the region is also benefiting from £1.3 billion of investment through city and growth deals that will help us stay at the forefront of global secure connected intelligence innovation and make a safer, more secure world for everyone. Find out how you can be part of it at investni.com/cybersecurity.